Carolina author will be in Charlotte talking about a dark time in the state's history.
Channel 9's Joe Bruno spoke to him this morning.
I'm here, Pulitzer Prize-winning author David Zucchino. Zucchino is here in Charlotte today for an event about his recent book, Wilmington's Lie, The Murderous Coup of 1898 and the Rise of White Supremacy. David, thank you so much for being here.
Good to be with you, Joe.
Let's just paint the picture. Wilmington at this time, that was the largest city in North Carolina at that point, correct?
Yes.
What were race relations like?
It was an unusual city for the South at that time. First, it had a black majority, 56% black majority, which was very rare at the time in the South. More importantly, it had a multiracial government with blacks and whites sharing power. That was almost unheard of in the South at that time.
Now, this was the only successful coup in American history?
Yes, the only successful violent overthrow of an elected government in U.S. history.
And so what happened?
Well, because blacks and whites were sharing power and white supremacists had controlled Wilmington and the state for so long, they were not going to stand for it. Particularly, you had a burgeoning black middle class, you had black professionals, and you had black people in positions of power. Like 10 of the 26 policemen were black, 3 of the 10 aldermen, and this was just intolerable to the white supremacists. So they planned this over the spring, summer, and fall of 1898, leading to the election in November. And their plan was to win by the ballot or the bullet or both. That's what they said, and they said, we're going to use violence if we need to, and they did.
A lot of people died because of
this. The closest estimate we could get was at least 60 black men were just shot down in the streets, simply because they were black.
Simply because they were
And they were trying to vote.
Wow. And what happened to the survivors?
The survivors, more than 2,000, fled immediately, but during the day of the riot, they spent 2 nights and 3 days out in the forest and the cemetery just trying to hide from these white gunmen. And as soon as they got back, they packed up everything and left town and never went back. In 1898, Wilmington was 56% black. Today, it's 18% black.
Do we have any idea where they went?
They went up and down the eastern seaboard, mostly to the north, where it was perceived to be a little bit safer, but they just basically spread out wherever they could find, usually with families or friends, and started new lives. They never went back.
What was Wilmington like in the immediate aftermath of this event?
Well, the whites completely took over, and in fact, the people who carried out this coup and massacre appointed themselves as mayor and police chief and city councilman. They completely took it over. They drove every African-American person who held a job in the city out. They also banished whites and blacks. The whites who had been working with the blacks, they banished them forever, took them to the train station and said, if you ever come back to Wilmington again, we will shoot you on sight. And not one of them ever came back. So it became this white supremacist stronghold that lasted up until the middle of the 20th century.
What should we take away from this incident? Why is this incident important to remember?
What I take away is just the power of lies and propaganda, which the newspapers, the white newspapers of the time, used to turn white voters against black men, and particularly black voters. And I see some of this, and you do too, I'm sure, in social media today, on Twitter, this demonization of people of color. I see echoes of 1898 today.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. David will be speaking tonight in West Charlotte at First Baptist Church West on Oak Lawn Avenue. The event is sponsored by Q City Metro. Back to you.
Snow falling and blowing.